All right, you guys. Elbow and radial ulnar joints. Let's first have a little 310 review conversation, and I'm going to emphasize the hardest muscle. And when I say hard, it's just traditional students had trouble with it, so I won't lead off of that one. But precedent that we've had at the ankle and subtalar, we've had a circle, a cross-sectional approach to see how muscles cross joints that had two separate joints in the same circle because you have so many muscles that influence it. And like I told you, I said from a cross-sectional view, the ankle is like an overpass and the subtalar is like an underpass, right? So we have precedent there. It's very similar here. We have two joints that share one capsule. One is the elbow joint proper, uniaxial hinge joint. So anterior crossing muscles are going to be elbow flexion pullers, and posterior crossing muscles are going to be extension pullers. Clean, easy. But then living in the same capsule, we have the dreaded, I think it's really cool, but the radial ulnar joint, wrapping and unwrapping, as y'all remember in 310, right? So the wrist doesn't twist, but the forearm does. And you have the head of the radius that's on the pillow. The body of the radius can flop itself from lateral to medial, even though the head stays lateral. Okay. So in your little on your little graph here, not graph, appendix. So the bilateral axis is your elbow, flexion pullers, extension pullers. The AP axis is not applicable because your elbow isn't meant to move in a frontal plane, I guess. Your elbow has hypermobility in the frontal plane. That's a bad day. Okay. So that's why that's in A. And the polar axis is the radial ulnar joint for pronation and supination. So think of the polar axis as being our merry-go-round pronation and supination pulls. Okay. So we're going to have muscles that are elbow flexor, pronators, elbow flexion, supinators, pullers. We're going to have some specialty muscles, just like we had at the hip, whose only job is to rotate, to be pronators or supinators. And then the one that I'm going to talk about today, the brachioradialis, is what we call a midway muscle. It's a muscle, I hinted at this, even though I didn't hold you accountable for it, because in the past, students really struggled with it. It's not you. You got to be playing the game to kind of see how, for a long time, to really kind of apply the rectus abdominis into a left and right transverse. But I think we can do this with the brachioradialis. Students in the past have done well with seeing how the brachioradialis can be a pronator or be a supinator based on your position. Think of it like this, before I get into the muscle. It's like taking a string or a rope to a pencil, or in this case, a plastic lightsaber. And imagine the plastic lightsaber represents my thumb, and I have I'm over here, or I'm over here. Well, if I'm in this quadrant, I'm going to name the quadrants, gravity is trying to supinate me. But if I'm over here, gravity is trying to pronate me, okay? So you have a muscle that's, when you're semi-prone, when you're in the middle, that muscle has no obliquity, meaning that it doesn't have any angles to its pull. So when you're semi-prone, the muscle just runs straight across here. But when you supinate from there, it can try to pull you back. And when you pronate from here, it can try to pull you back. So it's almost kind of like it's an oblique here, and it's also an oblique there. So it's trying to get you back to the middle, in other words, depending on your position. So I'm going to teach you how that works. We're going to practice how that works. And because it's important. If you remember too with the hip, how I said like the piriformis is an external rotator, but when you flex, then it lines up. If you flex even more, now it switches its function. You have muscles that can switch their function based off your position. I'm only going to hold you accountable for one or two of them, just to introduce them to you so that in grad school, you can have that knowledge. So when you get into more muscles that switch function, based off their positions, not new to me. So our elbow flexors here, elbow extensors here, our pronators are going to be spinners this way, and our supinators are going to be spinners that way. Any questions? Laid out? And I even try to put a note about the break radio. Here are your functions. The muscles that, this is our first one in the upper extremity where they're going to cross multiple joints. You're looking at your biceps brachii, that's going to cross the shoulder and the elbow and the radiolna. So it's going to have, it's called triaxial. Your triceps brachii long head is going to cross into your shoulder. As always, there's just a lot of stuff, so it's that break it down. I think this is a great example. Like, so you have all these different muscles all at the same time, but there's, and then you can kind of guess, but there's no real indication of where they cross. This is a lateral view, the interior view. So that's what I love about the cross section, is that the cross section kind of summarizes everything. All right, let's get to the big daddies first. Oh, sorry, I'm not on my game today. I'm a little tired. There was some stuff happening last night. I got a text from a former student. I want to let you know I've been using your circles to help me in my gross anatomy class. Hannah's in PT school. A few other people saw me using them to study, and now they're using the circles too. Thank you so much for giving me such a good understanding of how muscles work. It's made a world of a difference going into this, already having that knowledge. Oh, that's good. I'll get it with you. All right, I guess we're gonna start with the triceps brachii. So triceps crosses posterior. So at the elbow, it's gonna be an elbow extensor. You have, what I love about the tricep is kind of the upper extremities version of the quad. In that they're both extension pullers. Your olecranon is really an unevolved, like avulsed, it's a better word, patella. It's really what it is. And you have your tricep, and then there's another muscle called the KNES, which makes up a fourth muscle. So there's a lot of similarities. And just like in the hip, where like your rectus crossed your hip, so you got a long head and your tricep crosses the shoulder. It's a lot of cool similarities. So what I'm showing you here is all three heads of the tricep crossing the elbow, pulling in a direction of elbow extension. And then notice just the long head of the tricep crossing the shoulder. And it's almost like one of our hip adductor muscles. Remember all of our adductor, magnus, longus, brevis, that kind of stuff. On our circle, the tricep is going to be sitting in the middle of class at our elbow, because remember, we don't have medial or lateral pullers at the elbow. Elbow doesn't move in the front plane. So triceps brachii, elbow extensor. Let's see where our tricep is pictorially. Tricep. So here's our tricep, but it's being hidden by all these other muscles. Long head, lateral, medial. There's the medial head. The white stuff is just the common tendon that they're all yanking on. There's the lateral head. And then there's the long head. So that means head. So a three-headed muscle. The fourth muscle of this pseudoquad is our KNES muscle. So if you look at the KNES, this is a posterior view of the elbow. So crosses the elbow posteriorly. You're going to see this as a common theme. If the muscle is tugging on the radius, that means it can wrap or unwrap the radius depending on your position on the ulna. But when the muscle crosses and attaches on the ulna doesn't rotate about the humerus. That'd be a dislocation, right? So, so that's why it's only an extension. So humerus, ulna, posterior crossing. See what that would look like. There's our erroneous point. And if some of you are curious, like Campbell, that doesn't seem like a very big, powerful muscle compared to the tricep. Remember, sometimes it's not just about having a muscle to help with motion stability too. And you know, you have that tricep that's coming in kind of straight. Remember that old trick, keep your hands there and you can knock them off to the side because your force is up and down. So any side to side force can knock it off. So having an elbow extensor that kind of runs obliquely does kind of help with more joint stability while it's contracting. That's what it's showing. It's not just about motion, it's about stability as well. So tricep and coneus, this covers our posterior crossing muscles. Now let's go to our posterior crossing muscles. The most powerful elbow flexor that you have is your brachialis. The biceps brachii gets a lot of love because it's, Dr. Bob used to call it a show me muscle. But the biceps brachii is like the gastroc to the soleus. So in other words, the brachialis is like the elbow soleus. It's underneath it. The biceps gets to piggyback on top of it. But the brachialis is yanking on the ulna, so it doesn't have to worry about radial ulna joint function. As we're going to see in a little bit, the biceps brachii is pulling on the radius, so the bicep actually has some radial ulna joint. It's like being on skates. So sometimes your biceps brachii is limited to how much juice it can give if you don't want secondary radial ulna joint function. Brachialis can pull as much as it wants, doesn't have to worry about radial ulna joint motion. So let's see how this would pull in a direction. Flexion, puller. Again, just like a soleus and a gastroc. Remember the classification of pulling? We said it was like a fifth class pulley where a muscle is deep and then another muscle gets to piggyback on top of it. So that's what we're looking at here. So you rarely see the brachialis muscle unless you take the bicep out of the view, and then you can see deeper and see the brachialis. Sorry, midway, brachialis. And a lot of time, the description's pretty cool. So like, think of, if you're doing someone's brachial pulse, brachial artery, is a brachial part of the arm. So you have a lot of muscles that kind of have that as a, whether it's an origin or area, brachioradialis, biceps brachii, which is kind of this mid-anterior part of it. Crosses the elbow anteriorly, yanking on the ulna. Ulna is not going to move in the transverse plane about the humerus, so you can yank as much as you want. You don't have to worry about secondary radial joint. sits on the circle right here. Now this does get a little confusing because we got a lot of B's, okay? So I tried to put them in order of deep to superficial. So the brachialis on the bottom. Guys, it's your circle, so you can abbreviate it however you want. If you notice on the test, I'm never like, what's brach? You know, it's just an abbreviation to take up less space. But you can label it how you want. You can write it out fully if you want. I'm never gonna ask you on a test, what's the BB muscle? It's just meant to take up less space, kind of abbreviation. So there's your brachialis. Notice no arrows for radial ulnar joint function. Pulling on the ulna, pulling on the ulna, pulling on the ulna. Good old biceps breakout. Do y'all think that the biceps is probably the most famous muscle in the body? It's like if you ask kids, like, name muscle. Bicep. Okay, so let's look at how it's going to work at the elbow flexion pull. But unlike the brachialis, it's pulling on the radius. And as we know, the radius can wrap and unwrap about the ulna. What I want to show you is on this the skeleton here. You see this little blue dot right here? That's where your biceps brachii inserts at. And so when you're in a supine position, it's pulling kind of straight away. But when you prone, you actually wrap that bicep on the inside. So now when that muscle pulls, it's also trying to unwrap your radial ulnar. I'll try to show you. So here's the muscle. When you pronate, you literally spin it around and it's trying to unwrap. Does that make sense? So the biceps, so you think about like if you were gonna open up a corked bottle of wine, you may do like a flexion supination combo move, or if you're trying to like crank a lawnmower. So that kind of flexor supination combo move there, okay? So let's see if we can visually see it in PowerPoint, the supination pull of the biceps brachii when you're prone. Try this out, everybody. Take your left or right hand, flex your elbow, put your palm on the meaty part of your arm, like on your bicep, and then pronate and supinate. Don't move your elbow. Pronate and supinate and feel how your muscle lengthens and shortens. So in other words, you're not doing this, but that bicep is lengthening and shortening while you pronate and you supinate. I just find you feel it better when your elbow's flexed. So that's showing you that when you pronate, it gets stretched, it gets longer, and when you supinate, you feel it shorten. So it goes to show you that when you pronate, that muscle is getting lengthened because it's being wrapped around the radius. And so therefore it's pulling in a direction of unwrapping the radius. Does that make sense? It's a radius unwrapping muscle. You know what's cool is once we get into, we'll probably get into this Friday, but remember in the lower extremity we talked about like limb tension stuff and emphasizing the soleus or the side. And we're going to get into Friday how different radial ulnar joint positions emphasize certain elbow flexors, but it's not because of limb tension. So that's going to be hopefully fun. But what I think is fun may not be what other people. But I think it's fun. So the biceps brachii, elbow flexor, radial ulnar joint supinator. Let's take a look at some pictures. So here's a good picture of the biceps. crossing the shoulder. There's the short head, there's the long head. Both of the heads cross anteriorly, but the long head is anterolateral. So there's going to be a lateral crossing. Like when we do lateral raises and stuff, that long head can help that supraspinatus and some other shoulder muscles. But here's what I want to show you right here. So here it looks like you have two different tendons. But we have precedent for this. Remember when we were looking at the hip muscles, it looked like that gluteus maximus blended into the IT band. It's like, guys, that couldn't happen. This is so powerful. You pull the string off of the leg. So it's passing under, and then there's different, we call it aponeural, there's fascia. And the fascia is there for proprioception and communication. And so this string right here is the actual rope, the tendon on the radius. And this is just fascia that goes into the ulna to give proprioception. Basically, it's to help the bicep know where certain things are and give like how fast, how far, depth perception. But that's not the tendon. It's just a little fascia running off into the ulna for better communication. Let's see. Do a So in anatomy, this is where we got to talk a little bit about circles and function. Okay, guys. So look how the biceps brachii crosses and the elbow anteriorly attaches onto the radius. There's my brachialis onto the bone. Our circles are based off of anatomical position. Okay. And in anatomical position, the radii-ulnar joint is supinated. True, if you're in a supine position in anatomical. So what I need you to kind of think about here is that the biceps brachii in anatomical, it almost think of it as like, it's not that it can cause supination from anatomical. It's when you're in anatomical position that biceps brachii can prevent pronation, like almost like isometrically. So it's not like you can, from anatomical, that muscle could like spin you into a dislocated position. But its function as a supinator is so profound through a full range of motion. But that's why I gave you its supination pull, even though in anatomical position I can't supinate anymore, because it's still pulling you, preventing you from pronating. That makes sense. So if I told you that the biceps brachii is a shoulder, both heads are shoulder flexors, and we want to try to stretch the biceps brachii, we'd want to pronate our radii-ulnar joint. We want to make sure our elbow's extended, and we want to extend our shoulder. Kind of right. We got some sharpshooters. Wrapping and unwrapping. Ah, here's the one we just did. Gotta have a picture in there. That's the one we just did where you could feel it shorten and lengthening. So remember, supination is like the radius is in a supine position, and pronation is when the radius goes prone. It's nothing to do with soup bowls. It has everything to do with literally going prone or going supine from the head of the radius. It's perception. In fact, in 310, I gave them, most of the students got it right, but I gave them a question where we were here and they didn't catch that it was pronated because they were like, well, wait, I thought we were doing a soup bowl. It's like, wait, I thought you were listening to the lectures. So it's about going prone, going supine from the radius's perspective, okay? So when we're in anatomical position, it's face forward or face up. And when we have pronation, it literally is the act of going prone or the act of going supine, wrapping, unwrapping. Remember in 310, I've taught you about the thumb rule. In anatomical position, my thumb is lateral. When the lateral hand matches up with lateral elbow or arm, I'm supine. But when lateral thumb flips over to the medial side of my arm, then I'm prone. So you could always use the thumb rule to kind of show you if you're fully supine, fully prone, or midway. All right, let's get to some of these sharpshooters. We'll get to the brachioradialis last. So when I say sharpshooters, guys, these are the muscles like in the hip that were only like, remember we had like the lateral rotators, quadratus femoris, obturator internus, obturator externus, quadratus femoris, those things. So we have these sharpshooting muscles that are only pronators and supinators. I love these muscles because they have their function in their name. I wish all muscles would have their function in their name. So we have a pronator quadratus. It's a square-shaped pronator. Where are my athletic trainers at? You know when we were taught to spine board, right? When you taught, or it doesn't have to be athletic trainers. You may have seen when people are spine boarding people, there's people all throughout the person who's injured. Like you have someone controlling the head, you have someone controlling the body, you have someone controlling the feet. And so that's how I kind of like to look at the radial ulnar joint as well. It's almost again going prone, going supine, and the pronator quadratus is like controlling the feet, right? If that makes sense. It's close to the wrist, but it doesn't cross the wrist. And we know that the radius rotates about the ulna in open chain. So you could just literally imagine that muscle anchored on the ulna. Let me do my little pull hands. You can just imagine this muscle anchored on the ulna, reaching over and pulling the feet over into pronation. I got the feet ready. 1, 2, 3. Go prone with the forward. Also, what I love about this muscle is literally the function is in the name. I wish all muscles had their function in the name. Pronator quadratus. But as a reminder, just because it says pronator doesn't mean it's always going to do pronation. It can do supination when working eccentrically. And it can work isometrically to prevent supination. So I love when muscles have their direction of pull in their name. Makes it a heck of a lot easier. It's like if I just said, this is my friend Kevin. You don't know what Kevin does, but if I say, this is my friend Fire Marshal Kevin, you're like, oh, that person's a fire marshal. So I love having the direction of pull in the names. I wish they were all like that. So we have pronator quadratus, a square-shaped quadratus type muscle distally. That's going to be working on the feet. We have the pronator teres. Pronator teres is more about the body, helping control the body. Pronator teres wraps around the elbow. It does cross the elbow in the front, and some people will give it credit as being an elbow flexor. It is an elbow flexor, but if you remember, I'm only giving you the prime movers, the ones most involved. So the pronator teres is trying to spine board you like this, like more of the body. So the quadratus is like the feet. Pronator teres is more like the body. That makes sense. And then my absolute favorite muscle in the whole human body based off of name, the supinator. I wish they could all be named like that. Supinator, it's a blessing and a curse. Because although the name gives you the function, you just have to remember the supinator can do pronation when it's working eccentrically. Just means it pulls in the direction of supination. Let's look at how the supinator would work. So our pronation muscles, if you think about it, are pulling medially, right? So like pronator teres pulling medially, pronator quadratus. Supinator is going to be pulling laterally. Supinator is going to be pulling laterally, and you got some help from the biceps brachii that's pulling medially to the radius on the inside of the radius. Yes, the radial head is lateral, but remember sides of sides. So you could have an inside or an outside of that bone that's on the outside. Let's look at some PowerPoints. These, a lot of students say this is very helpful. Again, we're going to save brachioradialis for last. I was going to do it first, but let's save it for last. So this is a lateral crosser. Look at that, supinator. An unwrapper. So you can imagine you got the supinator laterally and the bicep medial, and they're working as a force couple. So you got the supinator laterally, and you got the biceps brachii medially, and they are force coupling that radius. You got one on the outside pulling here, and you got one on the inside pulling there. That's what a force couple is. You got working together to spin. And it makes that sound too. Are the videos helpful, the PowerPoints? So let's look at our pronator quadratus, square-shaped pronator that's at the distal radial ulnar joint. Pronator teres. I'm going to save the brachioradialis for Friday because it's different. But let's do some practice. If I had the hammer, the little exercise hammer, let's practice agonist and contraction based off of groups and then individual muscle. So if I'm here, the external force, gravity, is trying to supinate me. True. So I would need pronators to hold this position. We know that we're going to have some all the time pronators. Pronator teres is an all the time pronator. Pronator quadratus is an all the time pronator. Our brachioradialis, and again, I'm planting a seed, is going to be a sometimes, it depends on my position. If I'm in a certain position and I need pronators, brachioradialis is like, dude, I can help. And sometimes if I need supinators and I'm in another position, the brachioradialis is like, dude, perfect, I can help. So right now, all I'd like to do is do our all the times. And then on Friday, I'll explain to you how the sometime works, the midway muscle. Okay, so I need pronators. If you observe this motion, those pronators would be working out from here to there, eccentrically. So on the test, I would say, okay, guys, we start here, and then we do this. We start here and we do this, and I might say, pronator teres concentric, pronator teres eccentric, supinator concentric, supinator eccentric. And so your thought process should be, all right, I need to identify my group because I need to see why I need them. External forces trying to supinate me. I need pronators, so I can immediately weed out any supinators. Pronator teres is a pronator. I observe supination, it's negative work. See eccentric contraction. This pronator is going to assist in allowing the supination eccentric. Right? If I was here, gravity is now trying to pronate me, it's trying to wrap me, so I need supinators. I'm going to have some all the time supinators, my supinator, and my biceps brachii. Hold in this position, they're going to be doing some isometric work. If I observe supination, concentric, if I observe pronation, eccentric. And the gist of Friday's lecture is going to be, well, what supinators work concentrically to bring me up? But once I get to midway, gravity is not trying to supinate me anymore. Once I get to midway, gravity is not trying to do anything to me. And if I go past, whoa, now gravity's trying to supinate me. Whoa, now gravity's trying to pronate me. So that's the essence of this muscle that at midway is straight down the middle. And if you tilt this way, it's trying to pull you back up. And if you tilt that way, it's trying to pull you back up. Let's do some elbow practice. I'm going to give you one that is commonly missed in 310, but I'm hoping that after all this work we've been doing, that nobody in this class is going to miss it. And I'll make a deal with you. I'm going to ask this question. I may not ask the specific picture, but it'll be similar. If everybody gets it right, I'll toss out some class buttons. So the question is going to be super simple, like from left to right, are we looking at brachialis concentric, brachialis eccentric, tricep concentric, or tricep eccentric? I'm going to give you a muscle, and you got to identify the agonist and then say which of those muscles is my agonist, and then figure out the contraction. Do I need flexors or extensors in this movement? Extensors, right? I don't need bicep. I don't need brachialis. I don't need smash this up in the head. I need extensors. Who are the extensors? Triceps and inconiums. Extensors do flexion through eccentrics. But it's going to happen. Someone's going to tell me that I need bicep because they just see the flexion. And that's really, outside of giving you all these different muscles and directional pull, it's really what I'm hoping you get out of my class, is to see how muscles really work through real contractions, and not, it's nuanced. You know, it's not, there are certain things in life we can memorize, like the states and capitals. There's no nuance to that, but there's a lot of nuance with muscles, movements, and contractions. You can have flexion because of nothing. You can have flexion because of gravity. You could have flexion because of flexors. You could have flexion because of extensors. It depends. It's nuanced. It depends on the situation. Sense? So it's not something you can just memorize like states and capitals. We have to memorize the words that we're going to play with. You have to memorize the pieces of the game and maybe the rules of the game, but then it's teaching you how to play the game and the strategies to use to make good plays. Sit. Okay, what about hands start to go down? I'm going to use layman's terms that we could figure out. At the elbow, hands start to go down. So our agonistic group is going to be elbow flexors or elbow extensors. Elbow extensors, who are those muscles? The ones that cross the elbow posteriorly if you're doing circles, or just learn who the extensors are. Again, some of you are going to see pictures, but the pictures, the two-dimensional pictures, don't necessarily give you a three-dimensional concept. So the circles are a three-dimensional concept. The circles show all dimensions. Triceps brachii, inconius. If the hands go down, that's extension. So the extensors are going to do extension through concentric contraction, positive work. On Friday, in addition to the brachioradialis, I'm going to talk to you about neurological insufficiency, which is just a fancy way of saying how different elbow flexors can be affected by a radiological position. So during this exercise, even if gravity is not trying to do anything on the one on the left, you can still ask yourself, what's gravity trying to do during this exercise? You could always just expand it to say, during this exercise, gravity is trying to extend. Therefore, I need elbow flexors. Who are my elbow flexors? Brachialis, brachioradialis, biceps brachii. If my flexors are working and I see flexions, got to be concentric. If my flexors are working and I see extensions, got to be centric. Are we getting that part down? Should be by now, hopefully, pretty consistent. And again, that's why I teach you guys agonists based off of pull, so that the contraction stuff can make sense. Because if all we did was talk about individual muscle names, not all of them have cool names like the supinator or the adductor longus. Some of them have just these Latin names that don't infer their pull. And so it's a heck of a lot easier for us to say flexors do extension, flexors do flexion, to see the positive and negative work, to see the positive and negative contraction time. But if I just say brachialis does flexion, brachialis does extension, you see how you kind of lose that the element of contraction type inference. All right, so in a review, I'm going to on Friday do brachioradialis, the midway muscle. I'm going to show you how in different positions it could pull in different directions of pull. And then I'm going to teach you how different radial and joint positions emphasize different flexors. That'll be the task on Friday. We're good? All right, guys. Y'all have a good homecoming.